Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expanse Abridged Podcast series. Today we have Chapter 14, a Miller chapter from Leviathan Wakes. It's a good one, a little bit slow as a lot of these Miller chapters are, which is a comment I say on every other episode. But still a good one, and we kind of get the clock kind of ticking forward to war. We see it slowly building. And on that, this chapter opens with a belter ship being blown up. You hear about it on the news. It's a little rust bucket. 5 or 6 families take a loan out, get his little ship, and go mine asteroids. And he gets approached by a Martian destroyer called the Scipio Africanus and tries to run away. The destroyer basically just pops its ass. And there's obviously riots based on this. And depending on how you side, it's like the Martians say it was an unlicensed belter ship with no beacon, because obviously ships would have beacons in space. And it wouldn't speak to them, and the other one's like they just shot it down because they're racist. And then in response, there's all these newscasts going on, and a bloke on Ceres gets tortured for 8 hours, killed, and then nailed to the wall with a piece of mining equipment. And obviously our boy Miller is having a look at this bloke, and he's looking at him and he's like, "God damn, this man looks calm." He says the slack calm that came at the end looked like sleep. It made him wonder if when his turn came, he'd actually feel that last relaxation. Which is our boy Miller, nice and optimistic. He's got a new partner. She's called Octavia Muss. Obviously now Big Man Havelock's got his rotation out. I can't remember where he's going now, but he's that Earther corporation, so he won't have as much ethnic banter on him anymore. And this woman, he says she was previously on a rape squad, and then her crimes against children, so if she has a soul, it's been pressed thin. Enough to see through. And they're trying to figure out what's happened to this bloke who's hung up on the wall with mining equipment, and they realise all the cameras have been knocked out by kids and stuff, and they're like, well, they think it's kids, but it could have been maintenance, and someone's been kind of paid to do it, and they're just treating it very matter of fact, saying the skin and bone and gristle hanging in front of them were no surprise. You dropped a hammer under thrust, and it fell to the deck. Your government slaughtered 6 families of ethnic Chinese prospectors. Someone pinned you to the living rock of Ceres with a 3-foot titanium spike. Same. They kind of talk a bit, and they're like, this is a call to war, and they're like, actually, lads, it's already here. And then they realise they can go find out where he was kept, because his fingers have been burned off to remove his identity. That wasn't done in the corridor, because there's no acid stains. So Miller heads home, to the office, and send out that letter to his, to look at basically his family, finds out he's got a wife, but fortunately no kids. And has to send out a letter saying, "Dear Mrs. Santos, I'm very sorry to have told you, blah, blah." And it's, Miller actually does like a standard form letter, and it says he has to spin through the menu to find the family relation. So he has to select husband, and he has to change all the pronouns with little toggle switches. And it's inhuman, it's impersonal, and he sent it, and tried not to dwell on the pain it was about to cause. And it sees this incident is just another one that's happening, and there's twice as many as there normally would be. And he's basically kind of being miserable about this war starting, and rather than being like a big bang, a conscription or something like that, he's like, this is how the war starts, just a lot of unsolved homicides. So Miller, to try and spice his life a bit more, he gets more fucked up, goes and speaks to Captain Shadid. So the captain is the person who's kind of in charge of the station, at the military side anyway, their office, and we spoke to her once or twice before. So Miller goes over there, and he wants the kind of interrogation transcripts from Mars, who currently have James Holden, Big Man Jimmy. And he basically wants them because he's like, well, Julie Mao was on a ship that kind of went there, and he thinks they could be useful. And then she's kind of politely being like, "Oi, dickhead, that's not your first job, and I told you kind of drop that. And what source do you have?" And he's like, "An OPA guy told me off the record." And she was on the Scopuli, which was a little ship when we first introduced her in the Pluge. And he was like, that was the bait used to stop the Canterbury. And then you kind of realise Captain Shadid, who's a belter kind of through and through, starts kind of saying, why the fuck would they do that? And she says she smiles but doesn't reach her eyes. And she's like, listen to what he says. And he's like, you aren't thinking this through, Miller. The Mars Navy killed the Canterbury. They did it to provoke a reaction from the belt, so they had an excuse to roll in and take us over. So they're not going to give us anything. And even if I could get a record, it would just be screams as each toenail was ripped off. The Martian Navy isn't going to ask about the Scopuli. They planted that Scopuli. It was all a government prank. So she's taken the pill. She is pilled to the gills. And entirely kind of justified, really. Like, this was a government plan so the government could go in and do what they want. Like a 9/11 type event. Done by the government so they can go invade the Middle East. So it's one of those, really. And Miller goes, is this the official stance of Star Helix where they work? And the minute he says it, he's like, what the fuck have I just done? Obviously, he's just implied that, like, basically made a very large threat of, like, can I go public with what you're saying? And she immediately loses her shit and, like, in a calm way and says, like, our first priorities are safety and continuous services. If that's not what you're doing right now, there are better things for you to be doing. Your job is just to do that. This war is not our job, she says. Now stop being a pussy, get your ass out there and catch bad guys. And that's basically what he has to go and do. So he goes back to his desk and Muss is there, his new partner. And they've got a video of two blokes walking out a large orange box. It's like a shipping container out of a warehouse. And they realise that's probably where the bloke is. They know it's from, like, they can track based on the acid, where they're found, and stuff like that. And they've sent forensics to go and kind of confirm blood splatter, but they've traced him back from the CCTV, like these people who they reckon carried the bloke around. And they realise the people have already shipped off Ceres. Obviously, it's one of the busiest ports in the belt, so these people have already left their crime. And they're basically just joking that they're definitely not turning up again. They'll go to all those unlicensed belter stations in the asteroid belt rather than their actual destination. And they say they've gone into the middle of nowhere, or put a warning up. And they go, okay, cool, so case closed, chalk another one up for the good guys. And that's just basically just what they have to do now, because they can't go out in the belt to get them, so they're just gone, and it's like problem solved. Miller kind of walks home after that. He gets some rice and textured protein, so probably a mushroom, as they always like to tell us. And he gets home, and he's kind of walking around looking at all these people, kind of doing their normal lives, somebody sleeping on the street, some kids fondling each other. Says they might have been 16, 17. He saw the boy's wrists snake up under the girl's shirt. She didn't protest. So Miller's obviously very lonely as well. Obviously he'd say that, or would see that anyway. And he's like, he's kind of musing, going, the reason I do this job is to kind of protect these people. And he says all these lives will get turned into kibble like a kitten in a meat grinder. It's a fucking weird simile. And as he's kind of thinking, like, oh, that's why he does his job, to keep these people safe from like disorder. And then a little voice says in the back of his head, why isn't it your job to stop Mars from dropping a nuke and cracking Ceres like an egg? What's the bigger threat to that guy standing over there, a few unlicensed whores, or a belt at war with Mars? And he tries to keep walking from that. And basically that big point with Miller where he wants to go and solve, like, the really big issues rather than the little ones. And he's aware of they're, like, the important things to do. And I think we'll see that soon as Miller gets cracking. Because obviously it's a book, so obviously Miller's not going to attack the few unlicensed whores. He's going to go and solve the big plot line, because it's a book and none of it's real, fortunately. But anyway, so he goes, he gets home and he finds Anderson Dawes. So we met him, I think, a chapter or two ago. It's part of an investigation, and he was the belter guy. And they had a conversation where Miller asked him a load of questions, and Anderson was like, if I answer those, you're going to stop looking at Julie Mao. So now he's come back, and he sees him, and he's sat outside Miller's hole, obviously, because they don't have apartments, they have holes, and he's reading a book. And Miller says, Miller's never seen a book before. It's the first time he's ever seen, like, a paper book. And he says, the idea of that much weight for a single megabyte of data struck him as decadent. Great quote. And they go into the hole, and Miller says he's glad he's cleaned up. So last time when Anderson Dawes came around, there was beer everywhere and, like, leftover food. Now it's nice and clean. And Miller realizes he's done that because he thinks this meeting, we knew this meeting was going to happen. Anderson Dawes gives him a little bit of like a USB stick, basically. And that has the information on the riot gear, which we had. So when the riots first started, they went to their lockers and it was all nicked. Basically, there's this transaction where one sergeant authorised removing all the gear to put it somewhere else. It turns out that person doesn't exist. The destination doesn't exist. And then even the ship where all the gear then went on arrived at its destination 3 tons lighter. And the ship itself that it went on was also a fake company, which they'd investigated before, but didn't think it was very useful. So they've realised now it's entirely, like, something's very, very suspicious is going on. And the OPA guy Anderson Dawes is like, they probably even took the people to use that gear as well. And they don't know anything about it, and they just go, case closed, another one for the good guys. Another mysterious fuck-up that's happening out there. Anderson Dawes kind of follows around and says, you're going to keep your end, which is dropping the Mao investigation. And Miller says, yeah, sure, why not this. I wouldn't have shipped her home anyway. It's wrong to let mummy and daddy do what they want to her when she's all this way out. And it says Anderson Dawes smiled again. This time it actually helped. He says, I'm very glad to hear that. And then once we figure this out, I will tell you, detective. I haven't forgot. And it says there was a moment of silence. Miller couldn't decide if it was companionable or awkward. Maybe there was room for both. Dawes rose, put out his hand. Miller shook it. Dawes left. 2 cops working for different sides. Maybe they had something in common. Didn't mean Miller was uncomfortable lying to the man. Because obviously our boy Miller, he's not giving up. And then he immediately gets a voice note out and sends this voice note directly to Julie's dad, which is Jules Pierre Mao, the head of the big shipping company, Mao Kukowski Mercantile, I think it was. And says, I've got some questions for you about your daughter. So yeah, big Miller energy there. You kind of see this belt war growing and kind of people taking, not vigilante action, but kind of retributive action on people that are just getting caught in the crossfire. You see the police are kind of trying to keep things on top, only dealing with the crimes, not the actual solution, which is the big kind of underlying issues. And then Miller just being I want to do the Julie Mao case because she's fit and I keep imagining her, rather than my actual job, which he does half-hearted with the other belters. And finally he rings the dad, which would be an interesting one going forward. See what happens there. So yeah, good chapter. A little bit slower compared to the excitement of Holden that we had last chapter, and I think we will have next one. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, team. I will see you next time.